You know that feeling when the jar's nearly empty and you start thinking ahead of time? I've brewed coffee at home for years, dialed in many grinders and machines and tried heaps of beans, made a few mistakes and learned a lot along the way. But there is one piece of gear I've never really owned until now. Not because I didn't want to, I just figured home roasting was either too technical, too messy, or too much. But recently I have been chasing more control over flavour, more freshness in the cup, and yeah, if it saves me money in the long run, that's a bonus. Not a bad one either. Now, I'm not here to nerd out for the sake of it. I'm no pro roaster. I'm just a former barista, now home barista, making coffee every day and sharing what I find along the way. Now, yes, Alternative Brewing does sell these units online, and yes, this unit was given to me, but this video right here is my honest look at what it's like to start roasting coffee at home, because I already brew espresso and filter a few cups a day, and I know what I like. So roasting kind of feels like that next step. It's not another upgrade. It is a way to take the process one layer deeper. And I've got the same questions you probably do. Is the roaster loud? Will it stink up the kitchen, and how much does it cost? And do I need to be some kind of data scientist to get a decent roast? Now, so far, it has exceeded my expectations and been simpler than I thought it would be. Kind of fun too. Now, the Nano 7E doesn't assume you know what you're doing. It just quietly helps you fake it until you do. Like a roast assistant with a degree in common sense and zero ego. So yeah, I roasted these two beans up about a week ago now, so they're still pretty fresh. I have a Brazilian pulp natural and an Ethiopian coffee here. Now, I was aiming for a medium roast with a good amount of body and a balance of sweetness and acidity, but who knows, I may have just cooked these to a medium well. Anyway, I'm going to warm up the machine behind me and find out what I've actually made, because you think you may have nailed the roast, and then the espresso will be like, cute, try again. So let me jump back behind here. I'll brew both of these espressos, and then I'll come back and talk about what I'm actually tasting in the cup. So in making my espressos, I'm going to be using my usual recipe. Grind setting is where I usually leave it. My dose is the same, and the rest is just my normal setup. There are no hero moves here. I just didn't want to mess with the result, because if the espressos don't land, then all the tech specs and fancy roast curves, they're kind of irrelevant. All right, Ethiopian first. Now, this was my first ever roast that I did on the Kaffelogic. So we'll see how we go. This was an Ethiopian Shantaween natural, high altitude, a naturally processed coffee. So there's a lot in this coffee, I guess. Let's give it a crack. Now, the espresso ran really well, actually. I nailed the grind setting. That's really sweet. That's really sweet up front. Kind of like boiled lollies. There's a hint of like grassiness, just that hint, but the rest of it is all kind of berries. That's surprisingly nice. Like, I feel like I've given it plenty of rest. There's not too much freshness in this coffee. Like, there's that hint of wheatiness, but I think there is a lot of character in this. It's definitely not a generic pre-ground or aged bag from the supermarket. So there's still hope. That's really nice. Yeah, like, what would I do different to this roast? Take it a little bit further in the roast. It's got a really nice lingering kind of lavender aftertaste, actually. I would probably slow the roast down a little bit so it doesn't get to temperatures quite quickly, and that will help develop those flavors that I'm tasting right now. But in terms of like the lightness, the sweetness, the balance, there's some really fruity and floral notes in this, which is not too bad. It's lacking a little bit of body. I was hoping for a little bit more body in my espresso, but that's something that can come with the next roast. Surprisingly good. And it's got that real Ethiopian touch to it. Like, I'm not going to say blueberries, but you can taste Ethiopian in this coffee. It's really good. All right, let's try the Brazilian. All right. The Brazil. Now, I should mention, wow, there's so much crema in this. I should mention something that I didn't mention before, which was the Ethiopian, which was my first roast, and the Brazil, in fact. They were on default Kaffelogic roast profiles. So they're just straight off the menu. I decided to go with the Kaffelogic natural processed bean roast profile for the Ethiopian because it was a natural coffee. And then there was a Kaffelogic Explorer roast profile, which was similar to the natural. I had a look online at the profiles. It was similar to the natural. It just had a little bit different, a longer curve. So I wanted to try something different with the Brazilian Pulp Natural. So let's see how this goes. There's an incredible amount of crema on this. That's incredible. Smells good. All right. So the Brazil, I guess it's not wowing me a lot. It's pretty mellow. Like, there's no bitterness. There's no like notes that kind of turn me off it at all. It's very nougat, white chocolate. So there's a little bit of sweetness in there, not a lot of acidity, just a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of like nougat, white chocolate, slightly nutty. Now, when I told a few roaster friends of mine that I had these two coffees that I was going to roast, a Brazilian and an Ethiopian, they kind of chuckled at me and said, "Oh, good luck on both of those." I think I've done all right. I actually really do think I've done all right just for my first two roasts straight off the Kaffelogic using automatic profiles. And so far, I would say the Ethiopian is the highlight right now. I would definitely probably play around with this Brazilian to try, I guess, get more of that body out of it, that nougat-ish, kind of follow that line and see if I can get maybe a hint more sweetness out of it. I'm not too sure because I guess that's kind of what I'm going for, but it's still not terrible. All right, so this here is the Kaffelogic Nano 7E. And here's what I noticed straight out of the box. It doesn't assume you know what airflow is or what first crack sounds like. This manual here that you get with it, it's surprisingly readable and explains to me quite easily what to do without just throwing jargon around and then walking away. You use these simple buttons at the front to pick your roast styles. Now, I've already mentioned it comes preloaded with many, and they seem just fine. They've worked out for me so far. And I think this screen, it presents a good amount of information to keep track of details like time, temperature, and the development. And this roaster, honestly, it's a solid build. It comes with inbuilt cooling, so at the end of each roast, it will cool those beans down to the point where you can just pick them up and touch them, as well as super easy cleanup from this chimney, which also doubles as the chaff collector. Now, it's just twisted that and you dump this out every second or third roast. You want to keep this chimney on top of the roaster during the roast. It's generally useful unless you want your room to fill up with chaff. Now, the one thing I am still getting a little used to is having to pick the whole roaster up at the end of the roast and tip it upside down to remove the beans. But that's a once only situation. Now, I did expect it to be louder than it is, and it's not. I expected there to be like a burnt toast smell that fills the room, and that didn't happen. Also, the fan filters out a lot of the smoke. What does get out really isn't all that bad as long as you've got good airflow in the room that you're roasting in. While the Nano 7E does work great straight out of the box, with core profiles, preloaded, ready to go, they've worked so far. At the touch of a button, there's also a whole other layer that you can dive deeper into if you wish. That's the Kaffelogic Studio software. Now, this is a free software to download, and this opens up full control over those roast curves. So you have control over time, temperature, ROR, airspeed, the bean type, you name it. I can create my own roast profile from scratch easily. Now, if I want to tweak one that I already like and then see what happens, say if I want to stretch development time, also easy. And the studio records everything, so I can repeat what worked and then gradually evolve a roast to suit different beans as I get them. It's all saved and all editable. Yet, so far, this roaster runs beautifully as is from what I've discovered, and the profiles it ships with have been a great start with the beans that I use. Though, if I do want to get more involved or just completely geek out, then the studio makes that surprisingly approachable. So after the few roasts that I've done, here's what has stood out to me and what I've liked. The roaster is compact and surprisingly approachable. It doesn't make me feel dumb. I'm learning by roasting more than I am sitting down and having to read a book. And the end result, well, that's mine. Not just a barista brewing anymore. I get to add my own expression to the coffee from the beginning to the end. Now, what to keep in mind, the batch size of the Kaffelogic, it's great for dialing things in, and it is a 120 gram capacity. So it's like 5 or 6 espressos per roast. Remembering that you'll also want to get the grind size right as you're dialing in. And it only takes a total of, say, 10 minutes from start to finish. So really, in less than 30 minutes, you can have a week's worth of coffee roasted, which I think is pretty fantastic because it would take you more than 30 minutes to drive down the road to your local roaster, buy some beans, and get back anyway. It's not ideal for stockpiling unless you use the Booster Kit, which is something you can purchase separately, and then this will let you roast upwards of 200 grams per roast, which then allows me to roast 1 kilogram of coffee in, let's say, an hour, which is a game changer if you have a few coffee drinkers within a household. Now, I just want to back this up a little bit and talk about that learning curve, as it's not steep, but you may need to learn a little bit about green beans and that they come from a country and they're processed in a certain way, and that will help you get the best when roasting. So yeah, I did bring some pre-knowledge of coffee into this roasting, but there is also enough in this to keep it interesting because for the most part, you become your own feedback loop. And this is what I wanted to explore when it came to roasting coffee, where I can really begin to tailor the coffee to how I want it to taste. Now, if you're chasing full automation, yeah, this isn't the roaster for you. But honestly, I think that's what's kind of the charm to it. It allows control without demanding a PhD in thermodynamics. So for me, this isn't about going full roast nerd. It's about getting closer to my coffee. Better flavor, more freshness, more control. And yeah, that weirdly satisfying I actually made this moment. It's been cool. Now, if you've been curious about roasting coffee at home without dropping serious amounts of cash or losing your weekends to roast charts, I think the Nano 7E might be exactly enough of that roaster to get you started. And thank you so much for watching till the end of this video. If you have any further questions on roasting coffee, I'm not your guy. No, well, I am. I'll help you out. But Kaffelogic do have a large community of roasters and resources that you can tap into for more learning and understanding about roasting principles. But really, I am more than happy to help. So drop your comments and questions down below and I'll help you find what you're looking for, because after all, that's what I do. And until next time, thank you so much, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.